Yeah, the stuff is good.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you enjoyed lunch.
Silver.
Very yummy. Please don't fall asleep now because we've got a very, very interesting speaker just coming on stage. Absolutely delighted to introduce Candice Gardner, who is the Education Manager for Dermalogica. Now, what Candice does not know about skincare is not worth knowing, is all I can say. And she is going to be covering, I'm just going to read from here, the results, revolution, trends, emerging technology and skincare science. Hopefully we'll have time for questions at the end, so please enjoy. Candice.
Good afternoon, everyone. Right, so they sometimes call the post-lunch session the graveyard shift. So I hope that I'm going to be able to keep you, energized through some interesting conversation and discussion this afternoon. As Leslie introduced me, my name is Candice, and I have been a professional skin therapist for coming up close to 30 years, and I am absolutely such a geek about skin science. That's the thing that I'm most passionate about. But I also am really passionate about how we leverage the science that's coming to the fore, and we use that practical application as skin professionals. And I think from an industry point of view, that we've spoken about it today a fair bit, that the last couple of years have been odd, to say the least. They've created a lot of shift. And I think what's probably really important for us to consider today is what is the impact of what's happened over the last 2 years on the consumer, on the person who buys skincare, and what does that mean for us in terms of the services and treatments that we deliver. Because ultimately, there has been a change, a really big change. A big change in what people are searching for, a big change in what information people are accessing, a big change in how people view skincare. There's also a change in terms of the environment as other sectors rise, and we need to think about where we find our place as an industry as it moves. Because if we're still where we were in the 1950s, I can tell you right now you're dead in the water. Because the industry is moving and shifting so quickly. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today is I want to talk a little bit about the trends. We're going to talk about what consumers are searching and what consumers are looking for, but also what the trends look like in the treatment room. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the technologies that are coming to the fore and influencing what happens in the treatment room. And I'm also going to touch on product innovation, because there is a huge amount of research and development going into products. And if you were watching Dr. Mike's presentation this morning, there's some amazing stuff that's coming to the fore, not only in the skin science and us understanding how skin functions, but also what we can do with it and how ingredients can be leveraged and advanced to give us even better and better results. And so we see a lot of that out in kind of the consumer's at-home skincare regimen. We see a lot of that innovation coming to the fore. But what I want to talk about today is it in the treatment room? Because if you have to have relevance as a professional, you need to be able to offer your customer more than what they can do at home. So we're going to touch on that a little bit later as well. So let's start by talking a little bit about what customers are actually searching for. And did you know that pre-pandemic, you had 30% less searches for Botox than you did for facials. But now post-pandemic, there are 30% more searches for Botox than there are for facials. Just let that land for a minute. What does that mean for us as professionals? Well, some people might say you should be in injectables. That could be one answer. But there's another consideration for us. Why are consumers basically missing the skincare step and going straight to the Botox? That's a really important question for us to answer. Because as professionals, we need to understand, because ultimately that means we're going to be the missing middle, right? And we're in trouble if consumers don't see us as having any relevance in terms of their skincare programs, because they're already going there. But it tells us that there is also potentially shifting beauty norms. There could be challenges with that. So something we need to kind of prepare ourselves for. But then it also tells us that we're either not offering what they want, which I'd say is probably a fairly high probability, or two, they don't know what we offer. So looking at consumer behavior, and I think my experience of the industry over 30 odd years is that sometimes we're a little bit self-centric and insular. And we're very busy worrying about what we're doing, and we're not stepping back, and we're not thinking about actually who is it that's buying our services, buying our products, using us as professionals, and what is it that they're looking for, and what is it that they are doing. And that's why this conversation today is super important. So I'm going to show you some graphs, and I did laugh today when Dr. Mike said, oh, you know, no one likes a graph, and I was like, well, I've got quite a few of those in my presentation. I hope you're not going to run away. But I do think that they're quite telling. So the first one here is actually looking at the United Kingdom over the last 5 years, and looks at the trajectory of how people have been searching for different types of services. So in the blue line is microneedling, the red line is chemical peels, the yellow line is dermaplaning, and the green line is facials. And there's some very interesting things. Dermaplaning was massive pre-pandemic, but it seems to be leveling out now. Chemical peels seem relatively consistent, a little bit of an incline as we move towards wanting more from our treatments and our services. Facials is coming down, which is not great. I mean, obviously there's some very obvious dips during the pandemic because people couldn't go and get those services. But it's interesting that while facials are dipping down, the other services are not seeing less searches. So people are Googling the other stuff because they're not having facials. They're not looking for that, they're looking for the other stuff. And then what's super interesting is that you can see microneedling on the incline. So here is looking at just microneedling and peels. Sorry, the colours are switched around, which is not helpful. The chemical peels is in blue, and microneedling is in red. So when you look at what's happened with microneedling as a actually relatively young service, it's really only been in the marketplace for around 10 years. Peels have been going on since the 20s. Yes, they've evolved and they've developed a lot, but in terms of the sort of impact that those services are having, microneedling has really shot up to the fore and is very, very hot in industry at the moment. I wanted to show you a comparison because this is actually the US, and you can see that their trajectory is pretty much the same, although you can see that there is a bit more of there's a little bit more interest and a higher level on the graph of chemical peels in the UK, but actually the sort of pattern of shift is pretty similar. And when you look and compare the two markets, actually what happens in the US, we're about 2 years behind it. So we're usually around 2 years tracking a similar trend. So it's really useful to sometimes watch what's happening in the US market, because when you see what happens there, you can start to get a gauge of what might be the accelerators and the decelerators in our own market over the next few years. This is looking at skin conditions. So what are the top skin conditions that people are searching for? Because if we're promoting services, we're predominantly promoting them to facilitate a result of some fashion or other. And look at that for acne. It's way up there. This is over the last 12 months. So obviously we know that with the wearing of masks, there's been a massive acceleration in acne issues and conditions. And you can also see that sort of the yellow line is actually on sensitive skin. And there has been more issues around skin sensitivity during the pandemic than historical. And actually, bizarrely, aging skin's down the bottom, which is a bit weird. Because we seem to talk a lot about skin rejuvenation. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm just saying it's interesting to review what it is that's driving people to find solutions. Because you don't search acne just for the hell of it. You're searching it because you're looking for some kind of insight, information, or solution, or treatment, or product, or something. So I think this is a really interesting observation in terms of whether our offerings are meeting the needs of the customer. And when you look at a lot of services, you know, potentially, depending on where the customer is in their acne journey, how advanced or severe their acne is, you could potentially have lots of services on your menu that actually just don't work for this customer. But actually it's quite a high proportion of people who have these challenges. So perhaps something that we can think about in terms of where we go with our own services and treatments. So let's talk a little bit about the treatment trends. And you know, right now, I was saying to you, you know, microneedling is really leading the way. There's about 30% more searches on microneedling than there is on chemical peels. There's a lot of 30% around today, but actually that's quite a significant percentage in terms of a differential between one service versus another. But actually, there are other treatments that are really on the rise, and radiofrequency microneedling is definitely one of them. But when you look out at the marketplace, there are certainly there are companies and brands who are doing this really, really well. So you look at people like Hydrofacial, you look at people like you know, machines like PSA. You know, these are machines that are really capitalizing on broad spectrum technologies. They're really driving at fast, impactful results, and ultimately that's what the customer wants. There's other, you know, I can think of other companies out there that are doing you know, shorter services, but they're high impact, super high impact. And ultimately, from the consumer's point of view, we're not very patient. And you know, to just take yourself out of your therapist's shoes for a minute, put yourself in the customer's shoes, and just think about your own behavior as a customer. We're not patient. We want everything yesterday. We want our results the fastest way we can get them. Even with all the best advice and rationale in the world, we're just gunning for the end point. And that's also why there is a real risk of customers choosing the wrong services for themselves and getting into trouble, and therapists feeling pressured to do more than they know they should, because the customer is really forcing that agenda. They want quicker, faster, better, and they don't want to wait for it. So we have to really think about how we contextualize this in our own environments, and it's another reason why combined procedures are really on the up. So, you know, it's not just about what can microneedling do, it's about how can I take that microneedling and make it even bigger and better, and how can I accelerate, amplify the endpoints, the clinical endpoints, and the results that I get after that. Because ultimately, that customer is looking for the fastest route to the end point. I think it's important to say in that we have to recognize that behavior, we have to acknowledge it, but we also have to look at how we mitigate for the downsides. Because we need, you know, that's business, right? We need to think about what does the customer want, how do we meet that need, because that's going to make a great business. But equally, we need to look at how do we help them meet that need without compromising their skin health, their safety, and all of those things, and potentially your business, because your business is at risk when things go wrong. And so, you know, this area of kind of advancement in technology, it has really shifted the dial in what we can do. And I think I would challenge you that if you are not using some forms of technology or modalities within your work, you really need to consider it. You really need to think about what are you offering, because otherwise you are just not going to be competitive. And it's very easy to sit back and go, you know, they're all going to the internet, they're, you know, Susie down the road is, you know, slashing the prices or whatever the case may be, but you have to look inwards from a business perspective to say, what are we doing and what is our offering? And are we actually hearing what clients want from us? Because if we're not hearing, we're just not going to be there in the game. That's just the truth of it. And for some businesses, that might not be their route. They might not be into all the technologies and things. They might be thinking about, you know, offering a totally different offering, and that's fine if you can find that clientele and meet that clientele. But if you are in skincare, you're going to struggle in skincare in terms of traditional skincare unless you are elevating your game in terms of getting results, because clients can get those results elsewhere. So this is one that's on the up. So fiberglass skin tightening is going to be the next wave. It's here, but it's accelerating. And in the US in the last 2 years, this is super hot. So this is going to be one to really keep your eyes on, because it's addressing something which a lot of other technologies don't address at the moment, which is elasticity. And, you know, here this person's having under her eyes done. And for a lot of other modalities, that's a difficult place to treat. It's difficult to peel you, it's difficult to really needle you. You know, there's vulnerabilities there. So when we're starting to look at other ways of addressing tricky areas or doing different things, you know, there's other things now starting to kind of come to the fore in the marketplace that help us to address those challenges. So I wanted to kind of, from a technology point of view, I wanted to sort of shift into showing you when you have fiberglass skin tightening. So this is this kind of service. The not so great thing about this kind of service, which can sometimes be the same with microneedling chemicals, is the downtime attached to it. And clients don't really like downtime. So what happens then when you have downtime? Because it restricts the frequency with which people will come for those treatments or have those treatments, because ultimately, you know, I've got to have a chunk out of my life where I can't be visible to people because my skin is going through all the motions. So in order to address the downtime, you need to be thinking about, you know, how do you then shift the dial? So one of the ways is actually through product. So I want to show you the difference that product can make when you are starting to talk about serious products that are addressing very specific issues that perhaps historically weren't the focus of product before, right? So here, what we've got is a product which is specifically designed to treat micro-injury treatment. It accelerates wound recovery. It actually drives the skin through the wound recovery process, because actually, although we need inflammation, we don't want to be stuck in inflammation as the first stage of wound healing. We actually need to be driving through to proliferation and then into remodeling. That's where we want to be. But the person on this side has had a very conventional, well, basically it's a split face study, right? So he's had fiberglass skin tightening, and they basically done the product on one side, recovery product, and on the other side, no recovery product. And you can see the massive difference in the two. And so what that leads me on to is the difference that product can make to facilitate. So your machines, your modalities, all of that is fantastic, and there is some brilliant research and data around how those technologies are achieving rejuvenation and results. But you can partner modalities with great products, and you can then amplify your results, but you can also start to address some of the things which can be sticking points for clients to transition them to those more advanced services. And you can really help them to recover more effectively, which then means you have less risk of side effects. So you're less likely to have things like post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, you're less likely to get scarring. You can reduce the downtime, so how that skin looks for how long may influence then how rapidly your customers can come back to you, which then from your point of view as a business is a great revenue driver. But I also think that from a professional product point of view, we have to be innovating with professional products as fast as we're innovating with consumers' product, because the customer's product that they're buying on the shelf now, I mean, you looked at some of those studies from Dr. Mike today, even at, we're not even talking about professional products, professional brands, we're talking about mass brands at Boots, and you look at the phenomenal results that some of those products are getting and that those ingredients can get, and how do you differentiate yourself in the professional arena when I can just go to Boots and buy an amazing product. And I'm sure all of you are working with great products in your businesses, but it's not just about the product that the customer goes home with. That's important, super important. It's what they do every day. But in order for you to leverage your expertise, you have to have professional product that's innovating and that's changing the game in terms of the results that you can get, and that works with your modalities that you're using, and you can have all sorts of interesting procedures, but it is important that you're really evaluating whether you're getting the professional product and the innovation coming to the table as fast as the retail and the home care product is coming to the table. It's really important because it's the only way that we as professionals are going to stay in the game. We have to, because we have to make what happens in the treatment room count. It's really important. So there's the question. What's the future for traditional skincare? Personally, I think the future's quite bright. I think but that's my nature, I'm quite optimistic by nature. But I think it probably doesn't look quite like what it was before. And I think it's really important that we're tuning in and that we're keeping pace, because if we're not paying attention, the industry is going to be moving without us. And sometimes that can be quite challenging and uncomfortable. Change isn't always comfortable. But I think it's, what is great is that we're moving to a position where we can be taken more seriously. I think that's a super positive thing. I think we have had a really interesting time through the pandemic because even Susie was saying this morning that people are seeing us differently. They're seeing what we offer differently, and I think part of that is well-being, part of that is self-care, but part of that is also what we can achieve and what our expertise is in terms of those skin results, body results, health results. I think there is a big area there because customers are looking for expertise. They are searching for it, they want advice, and they can do a lot at home, but there is still a very big place for us. And we spoke earlier about the rise of other sectors like media aesthetics. And if you look at the numbers, to 2025, the media aesthetic sector is predicted to grow around 8% in the UK, compared to 3% for traditional skincare and beauty, and 5% for spa. So that side of things is accelerating. And We're in a somewhat fortunate position here in the UK in the sense that we don't have such a big divide between aesthetics, media aesthetics and beauty. Actually, it's closer than in other places like the US. So we actually have beauty, in inverted commas, has more of the market share and a bigger chunk of that media aesthetics world than you would probably see in the US. In the US, the media aesthetics market is much bigger than beauty. It's more than half, I think. And so, we need to think about how we make sure that someone else isn't eating our lunch, quite simply. And that's why it's important, from our perspective as professionals, that we know how we stay in the game. And we have a lot to offer, a huge amount. And to our advantage, the other thing we offer, which that sector doesn't offer, is human connection. We do it in a totally different way, and it's a big selling point, and it's a big plus for us. And it doesn't mean that, you know, it's for everyone. I totally recognize that there's a huge mix of diverse businesses and operations in the beauty industry. But I think if you're doing skincare, you really need to think about how you're staying in the skincare game. And so I kind of wanted to leave you with these sort of final thoughts. And it's just non-negotiable. You have to upskill because customers demand more of you and your expertise. The marketplace is moving, science is moving, technology is moving, practice is moving. And so you have to stay on the train and keep upskilling yourself and thinking about how you're going to do that in the best possible way. You need to think about, if you're offering skincare, what technology you are bringing into the game for yourselves, because otherwise you're going to struggle to compete. And I think because of the rise of media aesthetics, the legislative and regulatory world is shifting. And so you need to think about, how do you make preparations for that? Because the gap is closing. And we need to make sure that we're ready. And the legislation and the regulations need to come in, because we need to make sure we don't have any cowboys doing any kind of weird stuff that causes our clients to be at risk. And it's really important that we have some kind of framework to work with. But it's coming, and you can put your blinkers on and pretend and keep doing what you're doing. But if you're into those advanced services, my recommendation is strongly that you think about whether you have the right qualifications, you've upskilled yourself effectively, and that you know what you're doing so that you are prepared for that transition that's going to come in the not too distant future. But that is probably it from me, unless we have some questions.
I'm sure everybody in the room is aware, regarding the regulatory licensing, that this has gone through the House of Lords. So the secondary piece of enforcement legislation is currently now in development, actively in development, and we envisage that it will be in place in the next 2 years. So that to reinforce the regulatory licensing aspect, that is very much underway. We went through the bill reading in February, so it will be 2 years when we expect the secondary legislation to be implemented. So that's your timeline. Yeah. To get your house in order.
Well, it's so good to hear, because we've taken back on laser heroin. And when we started with IPL about 12 years ago, when we were obviously regulated by the Care Commission, we've gone through everything as if we're still regulated.
That's not a bad thing.
Because it's coming back. And we're the only, England's the only nation that doesn't have any regulation for laser. So it's, yeah.
It's definitely required, and I think you know, I understand there's lots of sides to the argument, but I think for business, it will make life a lot simpler once we know exactly what's required of us, where we stand. Insurers can insure us adequately for the right things, and I think that you know is really important, because at the end of the day, consumer safety is the highest priority above all else. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey, I think, the last few years. But you can see why we need it. You know, the Google stats and statistics show it's rising. We know it, we can feel it, we can see it out there. There's a lots of change happening, and it's really important.
You know, I think obviously regulation part, because that is incredibly important in our industry, that these trends are very much based on people sat for 2 years staring at their phones and wanting results instantly, and not necessarily that they fell out of love with skincare. Because I know for me, 36 years old, skincare is a massive part, and like Caroline Hirons is what my go-to, because I'm like, I want to know what new products is. Whereas Dermalogica as a program, and many other programs, are not really giving us the content to be able to teach our consumer. Like our consumer is taught by the Caroline of the world, rather than the brands. Like, we're not creating the content to show them why they need it. Does that make sense? It's very, if I go online now, I'm going to find Botox, I'm going to find microneedling, I'm going to find, where's the facials? Where's the really beautiful results from? From proper good skincare, like pro skincare. I feel like we don't sell ourselves enough as professionals. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the objective of my presentation isn't today to necessarily suggest that skincare isn't about, it's who we are and it's what we're about. And I absolutely agree with you that there needs to be more educational expertise online, but you're right, consumers, it's a challenge to find that educational expertise.
I think getting the content there. We are working with a demographic of young girls that need the education. You keep seeing with The Ordinary dropping acid on their face, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I think as professionals, and obviously as brands, because I'm brand owner like everywhere, but it's really important that we make sure that content advises them. They know what they're going into their salon for, and the benefits of it. There's a massive market in that.
And we were saying earlier, weren't we, that like that kind of missed step, isn't it? Like, I'm just shooting straight to Botox, but like, hey, we're here.
They go online, they're like, oh, she looks fabulous, let's go Botox.
Yeah.
But isn't it a case of not we're here? It's a case of this is what you should be doing while you're. Do you get what I mean? It's not we're here if you want to. We should be educating them. They need us.
Yeah.
It's a different message.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess the context here is that you're right. We need to have more visibility and expertise as professional skincare out there, visible, so that the consumer sees it and understand that it's part of the big picture.
I think one thing that's nice about the difference, you said how the medical industry and the beauty industry is a lot closer than it is in the US. And a few years ago, I met with a plastic surgeon in the US, and he was chatting, and they have an in-house skin professional that just does skincare for all their patients before and after treatment. And one of my clients went with a friend of hers up to Harley Street to have a facelift, and the plastic surgeon actually said, you need to sort your canvas out before I even start operating. So they really do, I think, support our industry, and I think that's really nice that there is a cross-pollination there.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is so much that can be done with product and with technology if you have expertise. And so that whole picture kind of comes together.
Yes, so that's what I was going to say, that, in terms of the medical side of things, if you understand some of the ingredients, these ingredients can actually be used by the beauty industry with increasing products as well as technology. Having that marriage can work very well in the beauty industry. Botox, dermal fillers, hyaluronic acid, they're just thicker hyaluronic acid. You could have programs in place that you could actually have a lighter hyaluronic acid, do like a Botox facial in a way, but it's not a Botox. That is where the beauty industry can actually thrive, before our clients go all the way to actually having Botox, we give them that option as a way, and they can see for themselves before they actually decide to go for Botox. So I think we have an opportunity here where we could actually understand more of the ingredients, understand how the technology can actually help us marry that together. So I see it as an opportunity.
I have a few clients, I'm a dermalogica salon, and we have a few clients and they've actually come off Botox, even though we have aesthetic ladies that come in and do their bit. But they've had courses of facials, like the Procar Peel, like microneedling, like nanoneedling, and they're like, actually, I don't need the fillers, I don't need the Botox, because we've achieved this naturally and you've taught me and I've learned a lot. So I think if you do capitalize out your clients when they do come in, there's a real...
But they just don't know about it, do they?
Not until they're at your door.
Yeah, they don't know about it, I think that's all. But as therapists, this almost like has to be a big mindset shift, because we're just conditioned to be quiet, gentle in a treatment room, and it's very hard to step out of that comfort zone. And I think that's where we need a big mindset shift of the industry, and for us to step in and to that expertise and shout about it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
And
no, it's
I think
Botox
like,
and all, but I run a franchise salon, and we do a lot of this anti-wrinkle, like the eye treatments and all, especially this eye area, where a lot of this, we call it pro-freeze. I mean, many of my clients come out of this Botox, have an anti-do, and age gracefully. If that makes sense. Yeah. Rather than killing nerves in your body every time you have Botox or
yeah, and I think, you know, that is, as I said to you, there's a shift in beauty norm. Somehow we need to, without being polite about it,
yeah, getting
you know, but thank you so much for having me today.